Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud, okay? Today we're studying Daf Samach Tes, Daf 69 of Masechta Yoma. Daf 69 is amazing. Lots of super interesting stuff. I mean, kind of famous stuff. Some really gewaldige stuff over here in Daf Samach Tes. So let's just jump in the Maisa. The first part of the daf actually continues what we started with yesterday. It was about being able to get hana'ah from the Big Day Kahuna. But then we get into some super interesting gemaras, and then actually at the end some halacha about being able to skip from one part of the Torah to the next. Which actually, who could tell me where is one example of where we skip? Maybe it's the only example in Maisa where we skip from one section of the Torah to the next on the fast days. Vayichal Moshe es bnei Hashem Elokav. So that you skip in the middle from one column. I think it's a few columns actually. Okay, Chavit. We are on Daf Samach Tes Mud Aleph, second line of the page. Poshtan u'mekaplin u'manichin osen tachas oshen. So we said that when Kohanim go to sleep, they can take their Big Day Kahuna and they can fold them up and put them beneath their heads. So going back to the shaila that we asked yesterday, so this would seem to imply that you're allowed to get benefit from the Big Day Kahuna, that you're using it as a pillow, so to speak. It says with puppet, so don't say under your head, say next to your head. And that way you're not actually getting benefit from them. Okay? Rav Mishasha says, well, if you can put, you're not allowed to sleep in your Big Day Kahuna, but you could put them next to your head, so then let's also say that tefillin, which you're not allowed to sleep in for the same reason, that you might pass gas in them, so then you could put them next to your head. Alright? And it makes sense to say the Kneged Oshen, that when we say that they would fold up their clothing and put it, the Big Day Kahuna, they would put it under their heads, that Lemaisa means they would put it next to their heads. Why does this make sense? Well, because because if we would say that it literally means that they would fold up their Big Day Kahuna and put it under their heads, what about Kilayim? Because after all, there is the avnei. There is the gartel, the belt. That the belt, we want to assume, at least for now, that the belt is made out of wool. Right? We had the whole shaila earlier in Masechta Yoma about avnei shekohen gadol zeu, avnei shekohen hedjot, or avnei shekohen gadol lo zeu, avnei shekohen hedjot. You remember that machlokas? About the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, so he wears, everything that he's wearing is linen. I think I was saying cotton at the time. Linen, lemaisa. So the shaila was the Kohen Hedyot, the rest of the day, every day of the year, is his gartel made out of linen, like the Kohen Gadol's on Yom Kippur, or is it made out of different kinds of wool? So in order for us to say that it would be kilayim, wool and linen together, so then we would have to assume, like the Manda Amar, who says that the gartel of the Kohen Hedyot is made out of wool, and therefore we're saying that. So, granted, so if we're going to say that you could take the clothing of the Kohen Hedyot, right, that the Big Day Kahuna, you can fold up and put it under your head. So then, even if we're not concerned about getting benefit from the Big Day Kahuna, but what about Kilayim? What about the fact that you have linen and the wool gartel, and you're going to be putting your head on that? So therefore, even if we would say that it's okay to get benefit from the Big Day Kahuna, but amasani b'kilayim, but we would still have to be concerned about kilayim, shatnez, and therefore from the fact that we don't seem to be concerned about shatnez, so then it would make sense to say that the Big Day Kahuna are not actually under the fellow's head, but rather next to his head. So now, So now, going back to if we theoretically would say that we're putting the Bigdei Kahuna under the head of the Kohen, and we are not concerned about Kilayim, well, that could make sense according to the Manda Amru, who says that the gartel that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur is the same as the gartel that the Kohen Hedjit wears the entire day of the year, i.e. linen. Well, in that case, there's no Kilayim to worry about because everything is just linen. And that is why we're not concerned about Kilayim, even if the clothing would be under the head of the Kohen Hedjit. But if you say that the gartel that the Kohen Gadol wears on Yom Kippur, which is made out of linen, is different than the gartel that a Kohen Hedjit wears, because the Kohen Hedjit's gartel is made out of wool, i.e. shatnez, ma'ikele meimar. Well, then we would have to then theoretically be concerned about shatnez if the garments of the Kohen were to be under his head, because they would be wool and linen together, and he would be getting benefit from them. And if you're going to suggest, well, maybe when it comes to shatnez, the issue is wearing it, but just kind of lying it out and putting your head on it, maybe that might not be an issue. But that's untrue. Ve'atanya, we learn in a brayso, lo yayle alecha, right? It says, Bigdei Kilayim shatnez lo yayle alecha, don't put any shatnez on your body. But you are allowed, says the Tanakama, or really the brayso, to spread it out underneath you. Aval, but the Chacham say don't do it. Maybe a thread will get wrapped around your body, and then you'll end up wearing it. So therefore, we see that we do not even spread out shatnez underneath us. And therefore, if we were to say that the gartel of a Kohen Hedjit is made out of wool, then we would have to be concerned about putting it under your head, because it would be shatnez. And if you're going to say, well, but maybe you'll put something between your head and the garment so that it will be like a separation, and maybe then it won't be an issue of shatnez if there's a separation. You hear that, Chevra? That's quite the chain of people. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazin, the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the name of Rebbe, the name of the Holy Fellows of Jerusalem. Very nice. Even if you have 10 mattresses, one on top of the other, and beneath all 10 of them is a shtickle kilayim, a shtickle shatnez, you're not allowed to sleep on any of those mattresses. So we see that there's no such thing as some kind of a division, a separation when it comes to shatnez. And therefore, if we're going to argue that the gartel of a Kohen Hedjit is made out of wool, then there doesn't seem to be any way that you would be able to put your head on top of these garments. So rather, it must be, from the fact that these, this shaila is not coming up at all, so it must mean that we are putting the garments next to the head of the Kohen Hedjit, and therefore there's no questions about shatnez or anything like that. Says Rav Ashi, no, the truth is that we're talking about that you're allowed to put the clothing of the Kohen Hedjit underneath your head. But don't we have to be concerned about getting benefit from shatnez? Bigdei Kahuna cautioning. Well, Bigdei Kahuna, they're hard. Like Rav Huna Breder Yeshua says, Hainamta gamda denarish. This very strong felt that they had in Irish. Sharia is okay. It's not an issue of shatnez because it's very hard and it doesn't warm you up at all. And as Rashi points out, right, that specifically you need to wear it in a way that's going to keep you warm, that you get benefit from. That is what is forbidden when it comes to shatnez. But just to take some hard clothing and put them under your head, that's not going to be an issue of shatnez. Very interesting. Tashma, come in here, friends. Bigdei Kahuna ayotze boy in the Medina, Osir, where am I? Oh my goodness gracious, let's read that again. Tashma, come in here, Bigdei Kahuna. when it comes to the garments of a Kohen. Hayotze boin la medina aser. So you're not allowed to wear them outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Uva Mikdash, and in the Beis HaMikdash, bein b'shas avoda min shelo b'shas avoda mutter. Whether you are in the context of doing the avoda, whether you're Kohen in the context of doing avoda, whether you are not in the context of doing avoda, if you're in the Beis HaMikdash, it's okay. Because you are allowed to get benefit from the Big Day Kahuna, Shmamina, there you have it. That you're allowed to get benefit from the Big Day Kahuna. Very, 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 very interesting stuff. Chevra, if you thought that was interesting, wait until you hear this. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to share it with you. Are you guys excited to hear? I'm glad. Where are we? Uva Medina lo. Is it really true that you're not allowed to wear the Big Day Kahuna outside of the Beis HaMikdash? You ready for this? Ve'atanya, but we learn in a brisa. B'esem v'chamisha b'teves. Right? It sounds like a Megillas Tainus kind of thing. Right? Who knows what the Megillas Tainus is? We're going to get to Masechta Tainus soon enough. Gevaldige Masechta. So the Megillas Tainus was basically a list of all the different days that are Yom Tiv days, that like that you don't fast on them, you don't say Tachon and things like that. So we have a brisa that says that on the 25th day of Tevis, Yom Har Grizimhu. It was a special day that's called Yom Har Grizim. We don't eulogize on Yom Har Grizim. How come? What happened on that day? Shebikshu kusim as beis Elokeinu melech sandrus moktul nachriva. That the Kusis, they requested from Alexander the Great that he should destroy the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And he says, Gevaldig, let's do it. Let's destroy the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. But due as Shimon HaTzadik, so they said to Shimon HaTzadik, who of course was the Kohen Gadol, they said, hey, this is about to go down. Ma'asa, what do you do? Whereas my nephew would say, guess what? Lavash Big Day Kahuna, so he put on his Big Day Kahuna, V'nis'ativ b'Big Day Kahuna, and he wrapped himself in Big Day Kahuna. Umiyakir Yisrael Imo, and he went out, he set out with the notables of Israel, V'avukol shel or biyadein, and they had torches, V'chol halayla, halalu holchem mitzadzeh, V'chol halayla, and the entire night, halalu holchem mitzadzeh, v'halalu holchem mitzadzeh, that Shimon HaTzadik with his people were walking from one side, and Alexander the Great with his people was walking from the other side. Until the morning came. Once the dawn came, so Alexander the Great said to his people, who are these people coming towards us? They said, oh, them. That's the rebellious Jews that we're going to destroy. Antipatris. Once they got to Antipatris, Zor Chachama, the sun shone, Ufagu Zebozeh, and they encountered one another, the Shimon HaTzadik camp and the Alexander the Great camp. Kevin Shirah Shimon HaTzadik, and when Alexander the Great saw Shimon HaTzadik, Yard mi Merkavto, he got off of his horse, Vishtach V'lefonav, and he bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. Amrlo, Melech Gadol kamoscha Yishtach V'leyehudi zeh, and his people said, what? Alexander the Great, a great king like you, you're going to bow down to this little yiddle? Amrloim, he said to them, this person that I'm bowing down to, Shimon HaTzadik, his image is always in front of me whenever I win on the battlefield. Somehow, every time Alexander the Great would go out to battle, he would see the image of some holy man. And he didn't know who this holy man was, but he would always see some image of this holy man, and he would be victorious in battle. And now he sees Shimon HaTzadik, and he says, holy smoke, it's him. Amrloim loma basem. So Alexander the Great said to them, how come you guys are here? Amru, to which Shimon HaTzadik said, is it possible that the house, that the Beis HaMikdash, where we pray, where clearly, from the fact that you see my image every time you go out to battle, right, the temple where we pray for you, uval malchuscha, and for your kingship, so techarv, that it shouldn't be destroyed. Yasuch ovdei kuchav lachrivo, you're going to allow these idol worshippers to lead you astray and destroy this temple. Amrloim, Alexander the Great said to them, Mi alalu, who are you talking about? Amrulo, so they said to Alexander the Great, Kusim halalu she'omdim lefanecha, it's these kusim that are standing before you. Amrloim, so Alexander the Great said to the Yidden, Harehem misurin biyadechem, do with them whatever you want. Miyat, immediately, nakvum bikvoseim, so they pierced the heels of the kusim, vitlaum bezin vesuseim, and then tied their heels to the tails of their horses. And they were schlepping these kusim on the ground, on the thorns and all sorts of things, until they reached Har Grizim, which is where the kusim hanged out. This sounds like a very, very unpleasant experience for anybody who would be on sort of the dragging end of things. It must be very, very uncomfortable. So once they arrived at Har Grizim, so then they plowed and seeded the mountain with vetch, just like they wanted to basically destroy our temple so that they could plant vetch on Har Habayis. So we kind of outsmarted them and planted vetch on their mountain. And then that day they made into Yom Tov, and that is the Yom Tov of the 25th of Teves. Now, of course, the shaila is, and how it ties into our Gemara, is that it says that Shimon HaTzadik went out towards Alexander the Great wearing his Big Day Kahuna. So on the one hand, we just said that you're only allowed to wear the Big Day Kahuna in the temple, yet we see that Shimon HaTzadik wore his Big Day Kahuna to go out towards Alexander the Great. So So one way to answer is to say they weren't actually the Big Day Kahuna, they were just things that were fit to be Big Day Kahuna. They were clothing that was fit to be Big Day Kahuna. There's also another option, which is to say that the pasuk says, where's this pasuk? In Mishlei? Tilim. That there's a time to do for the Eibishter because they are destroying your Torah. And says Rashi, you hear that? That when there is a time to do something for God, so it's permitted to be mefer the Torah. What's mefer? Undo the Torah. Wow. What a story, huh? What a story. And therefore, because of Eis Lasos Lashem Efei Torah Secha, he was allowed to wear the Big Day Kahuna outside of the temple. What a story. Let's go weiter. Chazan HaKnesses is notel Sefer Torah. So we say that the shamus in the synagogue there in the Temple Mount on the Har Habayis, so he would take the Torah and he would give it to the Gabbai, he would give it to the Skan, he would give it to the Kohen Gadol. So we see that you're allowed to give honor to the student in the place of the teacher, right? We gave the kavod of taking the Torah out of the ark to the shamus and then to the Gabbai and then to the Sgan, all in front of the Kohen Gadol. So we see that you're allowed to give honor to the student in front of the teacher. Says Abai, not lav davka. All of it really was out of the honor of the Kohen Gadol, to show that, he's kind of the manager in charge of, he's up in the hierarchy over there in the Beis HaMikdash. That first there's the shamus, and then the Gabbai, and then the Skan, and then the Kohen Gadol. It shows kind of hierarchy by having everybody pass the Torah from one to the other. So it's actually all, when all is said and done, it's actually all in the service and the honor of the Kohen Gadol. So it's lav davka proof that you can honor a student in front of the teacher. The Kohen Gadol omed michlashu yoshet. Then it says, and the Kohen Gadol stands and he reads from the Sefer Torah. Well, does that imply that he was sitting? But 1 second. Of course, we know in yeshiva bazar l'malcha bizdav bilvat. We know that only the kings of the house of David were able to sit in the Azara. Shneimar, as the Apostle says, Vayavo Amelech David Vayeshev Lifnei Hashem. That came King David and he sat before God. So only the kings of the house of David, of the Davidic dynasty, can sit in the temple. So how are we saying that the Kohen Gadol was sitting? Because I'm Rav Chizda Bezras Noshim. Okay, it's like Rav Chizda said, that we're talking about the Ezras Noshim, not in the Hazar or anything like that. What in the heck was that? That was so random. Al Kopanim, let's go weiter. Oh, that was my app telling me that somebody just joined a groove. Oh, alright. Well, I guess I won't be joining them now because I'm recording Babylon Talmud, but if ever anybody wants to groove, just, I guess let me know. We'll get you in groove, you know. Let's go weiter. Uncle Ponim, where are we? Right. Fine, so we're talking about the Ezras Noshim. We're talking about, right, so the Ezras Noshim, not Lav Davka the Azar. He wasn't sitting in the Azar. Okay. Kidamar of Chiz, the Bezras Noshim. Hochanami, Bezras Noshim. Okay, so here also we're talking about the Bezras Noshim. Vecha itma de Rav Chizda. Where did Rav Chizda say that they're talking about the Ezras Noshim? What was the context? Aha, Titania, on the following brisa. Heichon Korin Bo Ba'azar. Okay, where were they reading in the Azar? Now, apparently it's unclear. Are we talking about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur reading in the Azar? Are we talking about maybe the Melech, the king during Hakel, when he would read from the Sefer Torah, that was in the Azar? It's not necessarily clear. Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer b'Har Bayis. Eliezer ben Yaakov says it was talk on Har Bayis. Shneimar vayikra bo lifnei harchov asher lifnei Sharamayim. It says by Ezra that he read from the Sefer Torah on the street that was before the Sharamayim. Rav Chizda Bezras Noshim says Rav Chizda was in Ezras Noshim, which is interesting because didn't we say that the Shar Hamayim was in the south? In which case, how could it be the Ezras Noshim which was in the east? Chveis nicht. Vayivarech Ezra es. So by the way, so there you see that Rav Chizda says we're talking about the Ezras Noshim, and we say just like Rav Chizda is talking about the Ezras Noshim, so also by what are we talking about? The Kohen Gadol reading on Yom Kippur, he was in the Ezras Noshim, and that's why he was allowed to sit. Vayivarech Ezra es Hashem Elokim HaGadol. So it says that Ezra blessed the great big God. My Gadol, what does it mean big? Amar Yosef Amarav Shegidlo b'Shem HaMeforish, that he made God great with the Shem HaMeforish, with God's name. Rav Gidol Amar Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam. Says Rav Gidol. What does it mean, Gadol? It means blessed is the is God, the God of Israel, from one world to the next, forever. Says Abai to Rav Dimi, how do you know that it means Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam v'ad ha'olam? Maybe it means that the Shem HaMeforish, probably the four-letter name of God. So Rav Dimi says we don't say the Shem HaMeforish in the Gvulim, and says Rashi, Kol chutz la'azara kari gvulin. Any part that's outside of the Azara is called gvulin, and we don't say the Shem HaMeforish outside of the Azara. Very interesting. Vilo, is that really true? V'aksiv, but it's written Vayamud Ezra Asofer al Migdal Eitz Asher Asul Ledavar, that Ezra Asofer stood up on this platform of wood. V'Amr of Gidl, and says of Gidl Shegidlo b'Shem HaMeforish, that he said the name of God, and it was outside of the Azar. Horasha Haisa. That was specifically an exception to the rule for that specific time. All right. Right. And they so listen to this, Chevra. This is a very interesting Gemara. Yeah, I think it's pretty famous as well. It comes up in Masechta Sanhedrin also. I don't remember if it's in the same context, but it's super, super interesting, pretty well known. Let's go weiter. So that they cried out to God, B'kol Gadol, with a great voice. My Amr, what were they saying? Amr Rav, B'tem Rab Yochanan, Baya, Baya. They said, Oy Gewalt. Hainu hai da achreve lemakdisha v'kale leichale v'kadlunu l'chulu tzadike v'aglinu l'yisrael me'ar ahon v'adayin raked beinon. You hear that? They said, Oy Gewalt. Hainu hai, I'm going to read that again. Da achreve lemakdisha. This is the thing, i.e., the taiva for avoda zara, the Yetzer hara for avoda zara, destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, v'kalei leichale, and destroyed the Heichal, v'kadlinu l'chulu tzadikim, and killed all the righteous people, the tzadikim, v'aglinu l'yisrael me'ar ahun, and exiled the Yidden from their land. V'adayin raked beinon, and the Yetzer hara for avoda zara is still dancing among us. Klum yahavtelon el kabule pe'agra. Now we recognize that this Yetzer hara for avoda zara was really only put in place so that we could overcome the avoda zara and be able to get reward for overcoming it. But nonetheless, lo iyu ba'inon v'lo agri ba'inon. We don't want the Yetzer hara for avoda zara, and we don't want the schar for overcoming the Yetzer hara for avoda zara. Just rid us of it. Nafalu piska merikia. A letter, a note came out from heaven, Davakasav ba emes, that was written on it, emes, truth, i.e., that the Eibishter is maskim. Amar of Chanina Shmamina, Chosama Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu emes. Says of Chanina, we saw this in Masechta Shabbos, that we see from there that the seal of the Eibishter is emes, is truth. Osivu b'tainisa tlasa yomin, so they then proceeded to fast for 3 days, v'tlasa leilvasa, and 3 nights, misaru niale, and then the Yetzer hara for avoda zara was given over to the Yidden. Nafak also kiguria dinurim beskoche hakodashim, a fiery lion then exited from the Kodesh HaKodashim. Amru Navi Yisrael, that the Navi Zechariah said to the Yidden, Hanu Yetzer d'avodas kochavim, this is the Yetzer hara for avoda zara that just left the Kodesh HaKodashim. Shenemar, as the pasuk says in Zechariah, Vayomer zos harisha, this is the evil. And when they were overcoming this lion, when they were catching this lion of fire, ishtamit binisad mimazia, a hair was pulled out of the lion's fiery mane, viramokala, and it let out a roar, v'azolkali arba mea parse, and the sound of its roar extended 400 parsaos. Amru, they said, hey Chinavid, what can we do to contain this roar? Because we don't want that, God forbid, the Eibishter is going to have mercy on this lion, and keep him here with his Yetzer hara for avoda zara. Amru Navi, so the Navi said, Shadyu beduda de evara, put him in a lead container, in a lead pot, v'chafyu lefume be'evra, and cover it with lead, de'evra mashav shayiv kala, because lead absorbs sound. So if you could take this lion, this fiery, roary lion, and put it in a pot, in a lead pot, and seal it with a lead lid, so then it will contain the sound, and the Eibishter won't hear it, and he won't have rachmanis on the lion. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayomer zos harisha, that this is the evil, vayashlech osa tocha efa, and they put it in this container, vayashlech asa evena oferis apia, and they put the lead stone on its covering. Amru, they said, hoveis ratzon, well, and then they said, well, if we've gotten this far, if it seems to be a time of appeasement, that we were able to get rid of the avoda zara of the Yetzer hara for avoda zara, so then nibai rachme ayitzu daver. So why don't we also pray that the Yetzer hara for arayos should go away as well? Ba rachme, so they prayed, vimsor biadayu, and this as well was given over to them, that they would be able to get rid of the Yetzer hara for arayos as well. Amrlu, to which then the lion said to them, this lion which represented also the Yetzer hara for avoda zara, for Gilui Arayos, the lion said to them, Chazudi katlisu le'ahu, that if you destroy the avoda zara for Arayos, Kalya Alma, the entire world will be destroyed, because if there's because it's a low plug, there's no exceptions. If you don't have any Yetzer hara to sleep with people that you're not allowed to sleep with, well, you're also not going to have any Yetzer hara to sleep with people that you are allowed to sleep with, and that you're supposed to sleep with, and that you're supposed to have children with. Meaning, if the Yetzer hara goes away, to be attracted to anybody, so then nobody's going to be attracted to anybody, bichlal, and then there won't be any, the world won't continue, or at least the humans won't. So to see to kind of do like a trial, so they, contained this lion for 3 days to see what would happen. And they searched far and wide in Eretz Yisrael. They couldn't even find an egg from a chicken because, hens weren't even able to produce eggs. Like there was, basically anything that has to do with reproduction just stopped. Amri, they said, Heichi Naivid. So they said, okay, what do we do? Clearly, this is unsustainable, what we have right now, because, the world will cease to function. Nobody, people, animals, nobody's going to be reproducing. So Naktale Kal Ya'ama. So if we destroy this Yetzer hara, then the entire world will be destroyed. If we just pray that, well, why can't you just do it selectively? Can't you get rid of us the taiva to sleep with people that we're not allowed to sleep with, and just keep with us the taiva to sleep with people, with our spouses, with people that we are allowed to sleep with and to have children with? But that doesn't work. Palga b'rekia lo yave. They don't give you 50-50 in the heavens. It's all or nothing. So it's all or nothing, lemaisa. So either you get rid of the Yetzer hara for arayis and basically no more reproduction, or you keep it and you deal with it. So they gorged out the eyes of this lion and then just left it. But even then, it still worked a shtickle, that people aren't generally attracted to their immediate relatives. So it worked for that. Interesting. No, Chavi, you've heard that. You've heard like of that Gemara before, right? It's super interesting, right? Going back to like what we were saying before about like Gadol being the Shem HaMeforash. So Rav Gidol Amar Gadol shegidlo b'Shem HaMeforash, that when it says Gadol, that I think Ezra made God great with the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Rav Masna Amar says Rav Masna Hakel Gadol Agibor va'Nora Givaldig. It means the God that is Gadol, Gibor, and Nora. V'Hadar Rav Masna Matya. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. This is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who says, "La menukash man anshe knesses hagadola." Right? Ezra, I believe, was part of the anshe knesses hagadola. Right? It says Moshe kibbutz Torah misinai. Sorry, Yeshua. Yeshua is the kingdom. Sorry, the anshe knesses hagadola. That the anshe knesses hagadola received the Torah from. You basically were the next in line after Yeshua and the Zakanim to receive the Torah. And why were they called the anshe knesses hagadola? Hagadola she'achzira Torah liyoshna, because they returned the crown to its rightful place. What do you mean? Also, Moshe Amar Akel Gadol Gibor va'Nora. That Moshe Rabbeinu referred to God as the God that is great, strong, and awesome. That he doesn't show any favoritism and doesn't take bribes. Also, Yirmiyah va'Amar. But then Yirmiyah came and he said, "What's going on here? Nachum Mekarkim be'Echalo Ayin or Osav." That you have Gentiles yelling and screaming in the Heichal of the Beis HaMikdash. Where is the awe of God? Lo Amar Nora. So therefore Yirmiyah could not bring himself to say the word Nora. So he dropped it from Hakel Gadol Agibor va'Nora, he dropped Nora. Also Daniel Amar Nachum Mishtaibdim Bivanav. That the Gentiles are enslaving his children. Ayik Vurosov, where is his strength? Lo Amar Gibor. So Daniel dropped the word Gibor. Also inu v'amar adraba, and came the anshe knesses hagadola, and they said, "What do you mean? Dafka lehefech, dafka the opposite. Zoe gvuraso. This is how he displays his strength. Shekovish is yitzro, that he overcomes his yetzer. Re'ezu gibur akovish is yitzro. That he even gives space to the evil people, that he doesn't immediately get rid of them, but he lets them do their evil stuff, even though it's super hard for him to allow that to happen. This dafka shows how awed he is, if not for the awe of God. How could it be possible for this one little nation, the Yidden, to be able to somehow survive among all the other craziness that surrounds them? So there must be a certain fear and awe of God. So therefore, the Anshe Knesset Hagadola returned Gibor and Nora to Hakel Gadol Gibor Vanor. Rabban Vechi Abde Achi Vakri Takanted talking Moshe. In fact, the Gemara Givaldik, but how could Yirmiyah and Daniel have changed something that Moshe Rabbeinu said? Moshe Rabbeinu says Hakel Gadol Gibor Vanor. How could they decide that they're going to drop Nora and Gibor? So listen to the Gemara's answer. Omer Belazar mitoch sheyodim ba'Kadosh Baruch Hu she'amitiyu lefichach lo kizbu bo. You hear that? Because they say, look, God is true. God is a truthful God. And therefore we can't do anything before Him that's not truthful. And therefore they felt that if they couldn't say the word Gibor, they couldn't say the word Nora, they weren't going to say that. And that's being real. And that's being true. And God would respect that. And that is why they did it. Wow. Continues the Mishnah about Vikore Achremos V'ach Be'osor. Very interesting halacha over here. That then the Kohen Gadol would read from Parshas Achremos and then also from Parshas Emor, both in Sefer Vayikra, but of course in different Parshas. Achremos is Parshas Achremos, and Emor. What's in between them? Let's see if I can get this right. Vayikra Tzav Shmini, Tazir Mitzora, Achremos, okay, Kedoshim, Emor. So you have Kedoshim in the middle, right? So, in fact, the Gemara, V'ramini, how could it be that the Kohen Gadol would first read from Achremos and then skip Dar'in to Parshas Emor? Medalgim b'Navi ve'emedalgim b'Torah. You're allowed to skip in the Navi, but you're not allowed to skip in the Torah. So how could he skip? Lo kasha. Kan b'chdei sheyavsik haturgman, kan b'chdei shelo yavsik haturgman. So it depends, right? They used to have a translator that you'd read a pasuk of the Torah, or maybe a chunk of the Torah, whatever it is, and then the translator would translate. So we're saying that as long as you'd be able to get to the next section before the translator was done with this translation and nobody would have to wait at all, so then it would be acceptable. And therefore we're saying, so in the Navi, you can skip even if it's longer, even if it's a bigger skip than it would take to, if it would take to find your place in the new place where you're skipping to. If during that time the translator would finish translating, so if it's Navi, it's okay. Torah, it's not okay. But as long as you can get to the new section while the translator is still translating, it's okay. And therefore they would make sure to get from Achremos to Emor while the translator was still translating. But one second, but it says, Medalgim b'Navi ve'medalgim b'Torah, so you could skip in the Navi but not in the Torah. V'ad kama medalig, how much can you skip in the Navi? B'chadei shelo yafsik haturgamon. That when we have a brayso that says that no, even when it says that you're allowed to skip in the Navi, that is only as long as the translator is still translating. HaBatorah klal klal lo. But when we say in the Torah you're not allowed to skip, it means you're not allowed to skip at all. In the Navi you could skip as long as you get to the new place while the translator is translating, but by the Torah, no skipping. So then how did the Kohen Gadol skip? So listen to the answer. Amar Abaye says Abaye lo kasha kam binyan echad kam b'shnei inyanin. No. So what it means is that in both cases, it has to be while the translator is translating. If you're skipping longer, further away than it would take for the translator to translate, so don't do it. But in the Navi, you're allowed to skip from one topic to another topic. In the Torah, it has to be the same topic, but both have to be while the translator is still translating. V'atanya, as we learn in the brayso, medalgim b'Torah binyan echad u'v'navi b'shnei inyanin, that when it comes to the Torah, you're allowed to skip from one place to the next as long as it's the same inyan. But in the Navi, you can skip from one topic to another topic. But in both cases, it has to be before, you have to get to the new place before the translator finishes translating. And it's getting back to our example from the fast day. So, Vayichal Moshe and that entire parsha was really in the context of, the Cheder Egel and Moshe Rabbeinu praying to the Eibishter. And even in the Navi, though, you're not allowed to skip from one book to another book. But in the Trei Asar, which are 12 books, but one, thing, the Trei Asar, medalgin, you're allowed to go from one Navi to the next in the Trei Asar. As long as you don't go backwards, as long as you don't skip backwards, but you can skip forwards from one Navi to the next within Trei Asar. That was Daf Samach Tes of Masechta Yoma. Some super interesting stuff over there, right? So the first part that we talked about was getting hana'ah from the Big Day Kahuna. We then revisited the machlokas about, is the gartel of a kohen hedget made out of linen, or is it made out of wool? And then ultimately we said that you would be allowed to get benefit from the Big Day Kahuna in the Beis Hamikdash. We then had a super interesting story with Shimon HaTzadik, right? I think it's a pretty famous story about Shimon HaTzadik when he encountered Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great got off of his horse and bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik and says, I always see your image before I am victorious in battle. That was super interesting. And then we saw also that very interesting Gemara about the Yetzer hara, when the Yidden prayed that the Yetzer hara for avoda zara should go away. And at that point, then now we don't have Yetzer hara for avoda zara. They wanted to do the same with the avoda zara for Gilui Arayos, at which point they realized, like, wait, if we get rid of the Yetzer hara for Gilui Arayos, so then the world won't be able to continue, because there won't be any attraction between people, between animals, anything. The world won't continue. So they said, you know what, we have to keep that. But it did work, a shtickle, so that people wouldn't be attracted to their immediate relatives. And then we had that interesting Gemara here at the end about skipping from section to section of the Torah versus the Navi. In the Navi, you're allowed to skip from section to section, as long as it's within the same book, and as long as you can get to the next section before the translator finishes translating. And the Torah would have to be within the same topic, but also before the translator finishes translating. That was Daf Samach Tes, Daf 69 of Masechta Yoma. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Have a great, great, great day. Cheers.